Welcome to seminar number 7. We're going to get right into it. These are the administrative items that we need all students to know. We're going to follow up with just a little bit of discussion, and then we're going to have a look at the 3 ways to prepare for finals and the takeaway that we want. In the seminar we actually did the Superman pose, but I want to remind you of that. One of the best ways to change our mood and to move to a more positive affect or an emotional state is to change our physiology. It's the first way. If we're taking care of ourselves, then we're going to be in a better state to handle our moods better, and we're going to be more flexible. But if we are feeling a lot of stress in that moment around exam times, then power posing and the Superman pose, sitting with dignity, is a great way to shake things up, to allow you to feel and experience different physical sensations in the body, which then allows you to interpret those signals differently, which will give you a different mood. So definitely take advantage, learn about the power pose. There's a TED talk on them. You can watch videos on them. Definitely learn how to apply this for the upcoming exam season. Admission applications. If you missed the deadline to apply for a faculty, you could look for extension. Otherwise, you're having to take courses elsewhere. You won't be able to continue in Fresh Start, and you won't be able to continue on as a full-time student. Acceptance and registration for full classes. Acceptance will come in for your offer once they've seen the winter grades. You'll be able to, they'll calculate them and they'll get back to you between May and July, sometimes even up to the end of July. Depending on what registration looks like that year. Usually they turn their phones off as well. No one picks up on their phones, so it's a little frustrating. You have to typically communicate through email. They'll turn it straight to a voice message saying if you're calling for information on when your acceptance will be granted or the status of your application, please email us. We will not be answering questions on the phone for that. Registration for 4 classes is directly linked to acceptance. You can't register right now. Some of you are already trying, and this is usually the time that students start looking ahead to plan their classes. You can't do that, unfortunately, because you're not in a faculty yet. So you will have to wait. Again, very similar to when you had to prepare for your Fresh Start year. You had to plan. We recommend planning 10 to 15 courses that you hope to be in, and then once the registration for you comes through, you can actually apply. Withdrawal, still working the same way. Go online, drop it, or come meet me first and we can discuss it, and then we'll follow through with the withdrawal afterwards. Either way, you have to meet with the Fresh Start advisor before you can that withdrawal goes through. That deadline is April 3rd, so be on the lookout for that. If you're considering it, just make a time in my calendar and we can talk about it. Spring and summer, you can register for spring right now. There's no need for any other application. It's open to Fresh Start students. However, summer term is not open for Fresh Start. Fresh Start will end at the end of spring. So you'll stop being an Open Studies Fresh Start student. So if you want to take classes in the summer, you're not in your faculty yet, so you have to apply to Open Studies again. But only apply to Open Studies for a summer course, summer term, if you've completed less than 10 courses. In Open Studies, there's a rule that allows you to only take a maximum of 10 courses. If you've taken 4 in the fall, 4 in the winter, and 2 in the spring, then you can't take anything in summer. Okay, and that's about a completed courses. So if you did fail a course, then yes, you'd be able to have, in that situation, you'd have 1 available for the summer. So just have a look at how many courses you have completed. That means with a grade, a passing grade. Then if it's less than 10, yes, you can take a summer course. If you've got more than 10, then, or 10 total, then you won't be able to take a summer course. These are some of the resources available. If you're feeling sick, if you're worried about your mental health, definitely reach out to these supports. Again, peer support is also a great one as well. If you're having mental health challenges or you're experiencing some discomfort, in any manner, you can always reach out to a peer as well, and they have wonderful resources Dog therapy is shown to provide positive affect, it gives us that unconditional love, and it involves changing our physiology as well, similar to a Superman pose, how we can shake up our physiology that way. We can also get the touch and the sensation of petting a dog is also calming to most people. If that's your thing, definitely go check out. They used to be called Furry Friends, now it's Dogs in the Library. Check out the library webpage and you'll be able to find their schedule. Academic Success Center Workshop has 3 workshops that are really helpful for students around this time. These are the dates and times. Go to the website, check those out. They're around $15, $20 each. The idea of a workshop is to learn some new skills that you don't already have, or to speed up the specific process. For example, planning for finals, you could do the planning on your own, or you can come in and follow the plan that they recommend and have someone guide you through it so that you're not making as many mistakes if you did it on your own. So it's all about speed and efficiency, is what and learning a few new skills, if that's the case, and that's what we want to do. We can always, if we have that beginner's mind, if we have that open mind, we're always going to learn something new. Even if you've been planning for finals for a long time, you've been doing exams for a long time, but you can always learn something new. We're looking at the nuances of an expert at this level. Here we had the question response. We're not going to go through that one. You can check out the responses if you're interested. Some of the things that we saw that we asked students to do was to talk about their successes from last finals and their mistakes they made that they didn't want to do. Again, it became very clear that students wanted to They really planned their time better, they did good reviews, they managed their stress and their self-care. Those were the 3 categories that all the responses looked at. The mistakes were people procrastinated too much, they didn't manage their time, and they didn't stick to their plan as regularly as they wanted to. So it seems to be, we can see that there's this idea that sticking to plans is really important. Making plans is something that we're really good at, but sticking to the plan is something that's really difficult. And sometimes it's a matter of language, how we interpret that idea. There's an idea called cognitive reappraisal, where if we can reframe those mindsets, reframe our beliefs, reframe our interpretation of what's actually going on in front of us, we can have a completely different experience. So some things that came away from all of those inputs that you guys gave were, a lot of the times people were using the word strict and rigid when it came to their successes for executing a plan or designing a plan. They designed a strict and rigid plan, whereas if we change those there can be very hard to live up to, because it requires, as soon as you're not strict, as soon as you break away from that pattern, which life will throw you a curveball, immediately stress goes up because you're not sticking to that plan. If we change these words to committed and flexible, it allows us for adapting and allows us for uncertainty and variability with our plan. If it's strict and rigid, it's very hard to stick to, and that causes stress, and so it's easy for us to procrastinate, put things off, and to avoid the actual plan itself. So sticking to the plan, changing our language, start saying that you are committed to your plan, and your plan is very flexible. These are key terms that will help us. This is great language to help us stay on that plan, even if we fall off, because we all do. We've got those 3 successes, we've got those 3 mistakes. The idea is to try and stay on track. We're going to fall off track, but to get back as fast as possible. And being committed and flexible, that's what that allows us to do. We're committed to the plan. So as soon as we catch ourselves feeling lazy or doing something that was a distraction, being on our phone too long, or whatever it may be for you, video games, YouTube, internet, whatever it is, getting back on track is the key skill that we want to practice and to shorten that time. So we're spending more time doing the things that lead to positive impact on our experience and our grades. Number 4, I think the main goal or the main description when I asked everybody what was the main hypothetical, for the hypothetical, what was the main thing you could focus on that would give you an enjoyable experience besides grades and admission, because those 2 things are uncertain. So students feel a lot of stress around this idea that they can't stay focused. And so what happens is they feel all they focus on is grades and admission. And that there can be very stressful because that there is causing their anxiety. So they just want to focus solely on that. And we can actually have, what we find is that people can change their mindset and switch to a focus on the learning, focusing on the reviewing. This gives us a chance to take action on what we control. This came from an email from a student. They sent me that I was talking in early January around this question. And it was just this part down here just saying, maybe stop thinking too much about the grades. It does not mean grades aren't important. I just want to remind myself that good reviewing is more important than only care about the grades while without any practice. And I think this is a lovely mindset just to remind us. This is where I'd want everyone to get. And I think we'll all have less anxiety, even if our grades are poor right now. Because this is the one thing you have control over, and this is one of the major things that impacts your ability to do well, to get good grades. If we focus solely on the grades and that anxiety, we end up causing too much stress, and we procrastinate and we avoid this because we're trying to manage that stress, because all we think about is the grade and is admission, but we don't control that. So letting go of that, accepting that there is some uncertainty about what your grades will be, but the best thing for you to do in this situation is to again come back and focus on the learning. 3 things that the Student Success Center, the Academic Success Center and the Fresh Start program can help you with is planning, strategy, and dealing with distress around this time. So I just want to offer a few strategies, show you how we help you if you come meet with us. The first one is our 3-week plan. I'm just going to pop it all up here. You have to go through it. Again, 3 weeks, start early, gives you more time. So if we start early and do 3 weeks, 2 hours per day, that gives us 36 hours just preparing for finals. And then we prepare in a specific way. Week 1 is for preparation, week 2 is finishing up preparation and test appropriate, and then starting test appropriate practice. And then finally we're doing test appropriate practice. That looks like this. Every single week we've got 2 hours. This here's a reading week. This is from fall term for a student. We do have one rule, and just a reminder for students, this is up to you. We recommend on an exam day, don't do any studying other than that class. If you've got an afternoon class, don't do anything in the morning. If you've got a morning class, take the time off in the afternoon to relax. It's going to be too stressful. You're not going to really learn too much or process too much in that moment. Maybe just do some basic question and answers. All these bubbles here represent 1 hour. So before the last day of classes is all 1 hour. After the last day of classes, these turned into 2-hour sessions. The idea with the preparation and the testing is to take advantage of self-testing and retrieval over time. If we prepare 20 questions per class, then we're able to test those 20 questions very efficiently down here. So here, if I'm doing 6 days a week and I do 1 chapter for each of those days, I could do 6 chapters where I create 20 test questions for each chapter. Now I've got 120 questions. I've spent 1 hour each day for chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6. Could you come up with 20 questions for 1 chapter in 1 hour? Probably. You probably come up with more. Now what happens is, how long does it take you to go through those 20 questions? 5 minutes maybe? Maybe a little bit longer. Down here, when you start the testing, can you do 3 chapters in 60 minutes? Can you do 6 chapters in 60 minutes? Absolutely you can. So now you can test those key questions, those overarching questions that test the main concept. 80 to 90% of that material in that chapter, you're now able to review very quickly. You can do it 1 day here. You could do it every single day here. You got a 1 hour block. You could go through it, and once you've gone through it a few times, now you're doing chapters 1 through 6, and maybe the next week you're doing chapters, the next day, the next hour you're doing 7 through 12. Whatever it may be for you. You'll be able to be very efficient, spend 1 hour here, and now you can do what was 6 hours up here is now 1 hour down here. So now we're doing 6 hours worth of study time in 1 hour each time we're down here. If we prepare early, and if we use this idea, this mindset of preparation for self-testing later. We do have to make lists of whatever we need to cover, then we plug it in. So you can see in here there's M for math, H for history. We can see that sociology doesn't start till down here. Math and history seem to be a priority for the student for all various reasons. Again, if you want to do this, book a time with me and we can meet to do it. Strategy. One of our key strategies that we're talking about was preparation and testing. Test appropriate practice is essential, and I just want to talk about what that might look like. First of all, we have to have questions. Second of all, we have to include time pressure. We have to drill those questions so that those answers, this is why repeating questions over and the same questions over and over again will allow us under time pressure to answer those questions more effectively. So we want to incorporate questioning and retrieval practice into our study strategies, but we also want to include time pressure. So first of all, how can you make, during the preparation phase, how can you make some questions that would be effective? I said that you could go through a chapter and you could cover 80 to 90% of that content with specific questions. So here are the 3 types of question you want to ask, because in tests they test different information and they test different thought processing. Fact question is pure recall. Can you recall the definition of a term? Can you apply this term to a new concept? So a new concept means a new example of that. So we can have conceptual question, which is definition by example, and then skill question is following some rules or application of a concept to a non-routine situation that you haven't seen before. So we can make these 3 questions very quickly. We can come up with define content using the heading, subheading, and keyword strategy in a text. Contingency, boom, define contingency. That's my fact question. Explain contingency by using an example. That's my concept question. Here's my skill question. What is not an example of contingency and why? There I'm able to have to describe the discrepancies or the differences between what is contingency and not. These 3 questions cover any type of way the professor might ask me. I can go through and do that for all of these. Another type of question that we can do, professors love comparing and contrasting and asking questions that separate by differences between terms. I'm able to say down here, this is a big question, what is the difference between deprivation and satiation? I know that these 2 terms are both establishing operations. Because they both come under that heading, I can see these 2 terms, they are both types of operations. But there must be differences. They both have definitions, they both have examples, so let's just try and learn that information by asking what's different between the 2. That forces me to know what this is, what it is not, what this is and what it is not, and then I have to know the difference between them. We can do the same thing with our lecture notes. This here is a little bit harder because it's not as organized as a textbook, so we may have to come up with some of the subheadings and headings, but we should be able to go through each of these and come up with questions very similar to fact, concept, and skill. Finally, to get the time pressure into our classes, into our practice, use the practice test. Take 9 of these questions. Don't do all 15. This is short answer. It's not multiple choice. So just do short answer and say, I'm going to take these 9 questions. I'm going to give myself 10 minutes, and I'm going to write 2 to 3. I'm going to answer these questions. That there's a great way to then I've even gotten the page number for me to go check my answers after. This is a great way to induce the stress response to get me used to asking and answering questions under time pressure. So use these. If your textbooks have concept questions throughout, it's okay to drill the same ones. Maybe not with time pressure, but the first time you do it, use time pressure to test your ability to recall under stress. Doing this consistently, especially after the last day of classes, that's a great time to start doing because you've already done a lot of practice. You don't want to do time pressure if you haven't prepared too much. Make sure you remember to keep the record of your questions. If you're doing flashcards, fine, but this one here I find a little bit easier because we can still cheat with flashcards. Here, this one here is much better way, much more efficient. This is just a chapter summary of one of the chapters for a cognitive psych course. You're able to go back, and it's in chronological order of in the order of the chapter itself. Just go through. You can say if you got it right or wrong. Have your textbook with you. Go through, read all the questions, answer them all, check it off if you got it right. If you got it wrong, go and learn why you got it wrong. Then you'll be able to make sure that you're covering most of the material. And if you're using that subheading keyword terms, then you're covering all of the key information, especially with different types of questioning too. So you should be prepared very well for an exam. We can go one step further and actually predict the types of questions you'll have on the exam by reviewing old exams. Now, most professors will give us some sort of review exam. We can find them on websites online. The Students' Union has an exam registry. Some classes have them, some don't. But if you go to Course Hero, or you go to OneClass, or if you go to the Chegg website, you'll be able to find old midterms or finals which will have the types of questions. And so that's what we want to look at. What type of questions are professors asking? So this comes from one example from a student that I worked with. They had a sociology exam, and so they got, these are all the number of questions they got wrong. The professor gave them all the wrong ones, and then they gave them the midterm back. And we went through and we just said, what is the key word or the topic of that question? And then we said, what type of question is it? Was it a fact, concept, or application skill question? So we just went through and we were able to see all of this. First thing we found was there's a lot of concept questions wrong. So the student automatically has practice now, able to change their study strategy, saying, I'm going to practice more concept questions, which is definition by example. When asking the student, they said, yeah, I definitely know my terms and I learnt my terms, but no, I did not practice in any way trying to do flashcards for examples of each one. So this is a very quick fix. Every time the student does a new term, they add an example to their flashcard or to their question set so that they can review that multiple times. Going back to trying to predict exactly what will be on the exam is even more exciting. When we looked at some of these questions had, there was 4 or 5 in here that had, that repeated, and they were, number 1 was, what was the conclusion of blah 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 experiment? Insert experiment, and then what was the conclusion? Here's an experiment, what was the conclusion? The student got all of them wrong, and then there was a different variation of this. Instead of experiment, it was theorist. How can you generalize this theorist? Here's this person on this topic. What was their generalized conclusion, or what was their, how would you generalize their point of view? So these are specific questions that will be asked. So every time the student reviews in a chapter on gender or race or whatever it may be in sociology, they'll be able to look at every single experiment. They must know what it is, which is definition, and then the example is how it's done, but then the conclusion is applying that. How does this, what was the main conclusion they drew on that experiment? And then the same for theorists. Finally, this person had to practice definition by example, more concept questions during their studying. I met with a Math 114 professor to ask him for some suggestions. We know that students may not be preparing well enough to be able to perform under time pressure. During assignments, they may get 70 to 90 on their assignments, but on their exams under time pressure, they can't do the math fast enough, and so they need to drill. First of all, he said, know your procedures. You have to know how to do the steps, and this is what students do focus on. Next, he said you have to know how to model, and modeling was mind-blowing to me. Modeling is when they give you a word problem and no equation. So when it's procedural, they give you the equation and they give you the math, and then you're able to start and go through and just follow the steps, what you can recall of how to do the procedure. Modeling asks you to first come up with the math equation. So read the word problem and write the correct equation and then do the procedure. The difference, both questions are out of 5. When it's modeling, students average 1 out of 5. When it's procedural, 4 out of 5. So that there's a huge advantage for you to gain marks is to practice modeling in your day-to-day practice. Find a lot of word problems and practice turning them into math, and then get feedback. Make sure you've got answers to these so that you're doing it right and practicing that. Next, he said to drill the basics. Go back to the first 2 to 3 weeks of that course and know this the same way you know your multiplication tables. You're going to do very well if you know it that well. Maybe not to that level is possible for everybody, but you must know for every function you have to know the derivatives and the antiderivatives, and get your graphing up to speed. If you can visualize the math, you're going to perform much, much better. If you can visualize it and graph it, he made the point saying that if you want to do really well on exam, get your graphing up to 10 out of 10. If you're able to do 10 graphs out of 10 and you get them right each time, then you're going to be able to do very well on these exams. Conceptually is very similar to the visualization with a graph. You've got to be able to visually understand if this function is increasing or decreasing. Is it positive or negative when it comes to related rates? And finally, integration. Do the assignment. Usually the assignment for integration is optional. Make sure you do it to get feedback. Integration is one of the hardest topics. It's done last. Usually it's 1.5, maybe 2 weeks on integration, but it does make up, he says, around 20% of the final. So they don't spend too much time on it during class, and there is no feedback for students. So make sure you do the assignment. That's a huge advantage for you already, and make sure you spend ample amount of time reviewing how to solve these types of problems. I've uploaded these into eClass for you. This is a great way to come up with specific questions. If you have a look at your professor and how they're doing, they're asking their questions, we can see that students, this is one for reading and writing, this one for humanities more likely, this one here is for math and science, the types of questions people are doing. But we know that students are studying at this remembering and comprehension type question at a level 1. It's not very complex. They're doing basic recall, evaluate and expression, solve basic problems, being able to do very simple stepped routine questions. But we know that professors now, we're showing you that yes, they're doing procedural, but they're also doing routine problems, and they're doing non-routine problems. They're doing, you've got to apply some logical reasoning. They're doing modeling, not just one step. They're doing multi-steps and multi-part questions. So if you're not practicing or able to identify that this question requires 2 to 3 different parts, or it has 2 to 3 components, for example, trying to calculate the area of a cone, you do have to calculate the sphere and the cone and then subtract the overlap as well. So that can be really challenging, knowing that there's a few steps to it. People can miss those steps, but being able to break that down. So this table here might be able to guide you in asking those questions. Again, it's pretty complicated the first time we see that. It's a little overwhelming, so make sure you come and ask us for help if you want to speed up the process for predicting questions on your final. Finally, stress and motivation. This is a tough time for all students. So we want to talk a little bit about motivation and how to get some control back and how to increase value. We know that students will feel very different about how they value the course and how much control they feel they have in the course. So when it comes to control, we're talking about the skills that we have and is there a positive outcome likely? Is my plan going to work? The plan that I have, will it work? And so if we think of this as a scale 1, no, terrible outcome, no skills, and 10 being highly skilled and highly positive, optimistic view that there's going to be a great outcome to this particular course. Then we can look at value. Is there any intrinsic value or extrinsic value? Is there a great reward for this course or the task they're asking me to do, or do I really enjoy all the things that are involved in this task? So this person here, when we've got lots of skills, we've got lots of self-confidence, we've got lots of positive expectation, optimism, we really love what we're doing, and we see that the reward is going to be is very high as well, then this person is highly motivated. Now, these are the two we want to look at, is that where does your distress or your low motivation come from? And what we find is we have to look at the two different parts. Is it lack of control or is it lack of value? In this example here, we've got low value, high control. The person believes that they've got the skills and they believe they could have a great outcome, but they don't care. They don't find anything enjoying about it. They're very bored and they don't see a reward. This course is not really for credit. It's just an elective and I don't see the point of it. It's not very relevant to me. So this person here is actively disengaged. They've got lots of skills, but they don't care about it. There's no value in the course. So they've got low motivation. But you can see it's very different reasons. If we flip this around, we're going to find that this is going to be a highly anxious student. If you believe that you have no skills and that your plan will not work, but you love the class and you love the idea of having this as your major and getting back into that faculty, whatever it may be, you are fully committed down here, high value, but it's hopeless. You're powerless. You can't do anything. You have no confidence that you can achieve this goal. You are fully committed to an unachievable goal. So this is very distressful for a lot of students, well, for anyone in this situation, if this is the case. Low control, high value leads to anxiety and distress. So how can we do it? There's a wonderful set of questions here that can help you go through and just look at the part that you're lacking in, give yourself a rating out of 10, and then just pick the part that you're lacking in, and being able to go through each of these columns. If you're lacking in interest, then try to figure out how you can increase your enjoyment and curiosity and interest in this class. If you're lacking in self-confidence, start finding skills, start finding resources, start asking for help to build the skills so that you feel more confident that you could achieve work on your plan. So definitely trying to break it down this way allows you to really focus in specifically on how you feel. Instead of just saying, oh, I'm lazy, or I'm worried, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm burnt out, this here gives you some specific ways to start increasing control or increasing value, which will then lead to your ability to take action on your actual goals. Next, I want to talk about stress and what we can do in the moment when stress is really heating up. And this is something that we can practice day in and day out. This is a actual conversation I had with a student a few years ago. I've kept this one for a while now, and they've gone from regret to very far in the future and catastrophizing, not being able to answer one question. And this happens very, very fast because of the anxiety that we're experiencing. The fear will throw us into regret and guilt, and then quickly into uncertainty and fear for the future and catastrophizing, that everything will fall apart. We feel like we are out of control. And we want to get back into control. And so what we want to do is we want to experience this anxiety, and we want to reframe it. This anxiety is not there to hurt you. This is one experience of anxiety, but not everyone has this experience. Some people interpret it differently. We won't watch the video. One thing I want you to do to give you a space to reframe your anxiety and to give it a new, change the language around what that anxiety is there for. Instead of it there to cause regret and to cause worrying about the future and the uncertainty, we could reinterpret it. But first we have to accept that it exists. Now, acceptance is the person's assent to the reality of the situation. We finally accept that this is what's happening in my body, in my head. Typically, it's always to do with something negative or uncomfortable. We've all had that experience of being in an exam and we're running out of time, or we're not being as strategic as we wanted to with our time, and we've got to rush, and we're so worked up that our whole body is tense, we can barely breathe. If we're even noticing our breath, we're really worried, we're squeezing that pencil so hard, but we're able to, finally we're just like, oh my God, okay. We don't physically say I accept it, but there's a realization that we are in with this. I stop protesting the reality of the situation. I'm running out of time. Being tense, being stressed, and worrying doesn't help me in this moment. The best thing for me to do, I come to terms with it, is let go of the worry, let go. It's absolutely possible that I could do poorly, but I will do worse if I stay stressed. We've all had that experience. Now, I just want to really clarify what acceptance is. A lot of people get turned off by this term because they think, number one, that you have to agree with it. And I'm not asking you to agree with failing an exam. I'm not asking you to agree with being homeless. They think that it means accepting it means that you like it. It doesn't mean that you like it. You don't have to like the idea of being homeless. I'm not asking you to do that either. What we're asking you to do when you accept something is that you allow for the possibility for it to exist. You allow for the possibility that you'll get that question wrong. You allow for the possibility that you will fail this exam. You allow for that possibility for dropping out of university or being kicked out of university to exist. You're just allowing it. You don't agree with it. You're not liking it. You just have to allow for that possibility to exist. Next, physically, we want to stop fighting that experience. Stop protesting that experience. Don't try to control your feelings by squeezing up tight. What we find is, especially once that acceptance goes through, there's a huge rush of release. All the tension goes from our body. We have a big sigh. Oh my God. We get that experience of letting go. And that's what we want to induce. We want to have this mental and physical layer, and that's what acceptance gives us. Allowing for the possibility for that anxiety to exist. You are scared, you are angry, you are experiencing shame or guilt. Allow for that to exist, and then redirect your attention from that feeling, from that emotion. You've got it there, you've welcomed it. Imagine you're in a car. This is one fun way to do it. You're in a car, you're driving the car, you're allowing the anxiety or the fear, whatever it is you've got going on in your stomach, or how you're interpreting it, put it in the back seat. It's coming along for the ride, but you're in charge. You're driving. It's not driving. When you're fighting that stress, when you're fighting the anxiety, when you're worrying and worried that you're going to fail that exam, you're letting stress drive the car. So we want to put stress in the back seat. We want to put that anxiety in the back seat. It's welcome. It's welcome to be there. But you're in the driver's seat. You're there to focus. Next, what we can do is we can even take that stress and reinterpret it and say, okay, fine, you're coming along for the ride. I'm going to use you. The stress is there to help you survive. In this case here, you're interpreting a threat from your exam. So before, fear, usually we feel it in our legs. We might find our legs jittery. That there's to help us run faster, to run away from things. Here we can start reinterpreting this energy as being able to help you focus and remember the material. If we can interpret a positive experience for our anxiety we experience in exams, some of you may be very competent in other areas of your life where you are very stressed in a performance situation, in music, in sports, any other area, that context, you interpret the stress, the exact same bodily sensations, the same stress, but instead of stress you call it excitement or nervous energy that you're going to use. But under a test exam you interpret it as fear of failure, as that you don't know what you're doing, as that you didn't prepare enough. Different context, exact same physical experience. What we want to do is we want to reinterpret it. Once we've accepted, we can redirect, maybe use new language to say, hey, this stress is here to help me, just like it does when I'm in my other situations, in my other context. Here is a list of skills that you could go through. Have a look through some of these. These ones here help you to bring your attention. Once you're redirecting yourself, once you've accepted, then you're able to focus your attention in the present moment. And these are some ways to get back. Focusing on your breath, watching your breath, different types of breaths, and then grounding, focusing on your interacting with your environment. There's two different networks that we have in our brain. One of them is the narrative network, which is very self-oriented, and the other is experiential network, and they don't overlap. They can't overlap. So if we're in the narrative network where we're focusing just on ourselves and all that worry and that stress, and we're interpreting that stress as affecting me and I'm worrying, focus solely on me, if I start focusing on my external environment, if I just focus on my environment through vision, through my senses, I can touch the table, I can see 5 things, I can hear 4 things, I can smell 3 things, I can taste 2 things, and I can touch 1 thing. This idea of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with our senses. We're touching our physical environment, and that'll take us out of the narrative network. We'll slow down that chatter in our head and that worrying, and we'll start touching and feeling. We get into experiential network, and they can't operate at the same time. This is why breathing and grounding skills and that mindfulness, coming back to the present moment, work. I would encourage you to pick one of these and drill it. Use it every single day. Practice your deep breathing. Practice stressing yourself out, amping up your anxiety, not to a too higher level. You don't want to go to like 100 out of 100, but just practicing stressing yourself out to a 70 or 80 level of what you feel is a 70 or 80 for you, and then practice your breathing, practice the grounding skills so that when you're in the exam, these become habitual. You can apply them once you've accepted, and then try to regain attention for the present moment. We're not going to induce the stress response. That's something that you can do on your own time. Again, if you're experiencing test anxiety, definitely give us a call. We'll be able to make up an appointment and meet and discuss how you can manage your test anxiety and what are some of the strategies you can do. If you do the other 2, it will also manage your anxiety as well. That'll probably bring a lot of anxiety down. Please start early. Monitor your plan. Careful of your language around how you're describing your plan. You are committed to a flexible plan. Prepare and test questions. Practice stress by accepting, redirecting, and learning to come back to your breath, come back to the present moment by focusing on the 5 things you can see, 4 things that you can hear. And remember, always ask for help. Now's the time to ask for help. Nice and early. Get ready to go. Awesome. Look below this video for the task you need to complete the assignment. Thank you very much.